A significant portion of the work done by the legal aid programs we fund involves housing matters. Last year, about 30% of all cases handled by LSC-funded legal aid programs were housing-related, and the majority of those related to tenant matters, the biggest piece of those being evictions. As John mentioned, there's been a spike in evictions in the United States in this century. Evictions have doubled between 2000 and 2016. Eviction is the process by which a person is compelled, a tenant is compelled to leave their home. Our discussion today is going to focus on legal evictions, evictions that occur as a result of court processes. But as you'll also hear, there are illegal evictions, where landlords just help themselves to evictions and force tenants out of their homes. The numbers that I just spoke about are legal evictions, and they understate what the magnitude of the true problem is. A person who cannot afford a lawyer in an eviction is really lost. But it is common in the United States today for more than 95% of tenants in eviction cases not to have a lawyer, even though more than 95% of landlords do have a lawyer. The unrepresented litigant who tries to navigate an eviction case alone confronts a system that was created by lawyers, for lawyers, designed on the assumption that everyone has a lawyer. Everything about the system, from the language of the law to the forms that are used, to the rules of civil procedure, to the rules of evidence, was created with lawyers in mind. It's a system that works pretty well if you have a lawyer, and not well at all if you don't.
And my wife is not here today, so I'm going to go issue an apology. She tells me never open your speech with an apology. But David and I were at another event, working in the interesting sort of way on trying to find people to come up here to help us cure this kind of a problem. And so that's why we were a bit late. So let me thank you, Mr. Chairman and Mr. President, for having us here today and sponsoring this event. I also want to thank the panelists for traveling to Washington to help put this on, most especially my homegirl and longtime friend. I know those of you who look in on our proceedings up here, you know that we often refer to each other as my good friend, and most times we don't mean it. When I call Andrea Loney my good friend, I really do mean it. Our families go back much farther than we would like to admit. In fact, if you could look at her hair and my lack of hair, you can know that was a long, long time ago, but I thank her so much. As many of you know, a recent research by Princeton University has confirmed what many have observed for several years. There is an eviction crisis in this country. According to Princeton, in 2016 alone, almost 1 million households experienced evictions. This is an acute problem in South Carolina, where among large cities, North Charleston, in my congressional district, was named #1 nationally with an eviction rate of 16.5%. And Columbia, where I live, and which is in my congressional district, is #8 nationally. And when I met with the congressional our caucus, Democratic caucus, after I saw these numbers, and we looked at the top 10 cities that experienced evictions, it was amazing that 6 of those cities were home to military installations. Charleston and Columbia. Fort Jackson, the second largest. In fact, we train more infantrymen in boot camp anyway, in Fort Jackson than anywhere else in the country. And we think there's something interesting about that phenomenon. And that's what really set me off with this event. Now, this crisis is as complex as it is real. I've heard from many of my constituents at town halls and around the district that one critical problem, specific to evictions, is the inability for most people to get legal representation when they face eviction. In 2016, a total of 41,000 South Carolina families were evicted by court action, but only a very small number of them were represented by South Carolina Legal Services. Legal aid organizations can only do as many cases as funding will allow. After years of flat funding, for 2018, we were able to increase by $25 million, an increase up to $410 million. We could do with twice that much, and we are going to work to get us there. This should help, but much more needs to be done. And I'm proud to have worked with David Price and the Legal Services Corporation on ways to increase funding. David is on the Appropriation Committee. I'm on leave from the Appropriation Committee, but I ain't on leave too far away. And we're working on this issue. And although his amendment that he put up earlier this year was not adopted, we are going to keep looking for ways to solve this problem. Because fundamentally, no family should be in court facing the loss of their home without an attorney to represent them and defend their legal rights. And there's nobody more devoted to this than my homegirl. And I'm going to be here to help her do whatever she needs to do. And with that, I'll leave that.
Once again, thank you for inviting us. Thank you all for taking your time to come and listen to us. I know for some of you, you are mandated to be here, but that's okay, as long as you take excellent notes and you take them back to your congressman or congresswoman. So once again, thank you. We do have a fairly high eviction. No, I should not say that. Let me be honest. We have a very high eviction rate in our state. In some areas, it's obviously much higher than other areas. In that recent report that was done, or the study of evictions in South Carolina or across the nation, they did not actually tell us about the type of housing that people were being evicted from. So what we did was we were really interested in finding out what type of housing and where are the evictions really increasing. And by that I mean subsidized versus private landlord-tenant. And what we have discovered, based on what comes into our office, it is the private landlord-tenant evictions that are increasing at a much more rapid rate than public housing or subsidized housing evictions. And so why is that, you ask? Well, we looked at, particularly in the Charleston area, as you just heard about, and in Greenville. Those are areas where we have a lot of industry coming. A lot of high-paying jobs are coming. The housing market, even for people who are making money, is just not quite keeping up with the need for housing for all of these new people who are coming in for these high-paying jobs. So what's happening in our state is a lot of private business people, investors, if you will, are buying up the old affordable rental houses. They're buying them at tax sales. They're buying them at judicial sales. And they're rehabbing these houses. And then the rent's so high that the low-income people cannot afford to pay the rent. So while our state really boasts about the rate of unemployment being extremely low, we have a significant number of people who are underemployed. Completely underemployed. And let's look at Charleston. That's basically, it's a military base there, yes, but it's also an area where people who are low income, a significant number of them are working in the service and tourist industry. They can't get those jobs at Boeing because unfortunately they don't have the education to do it. So these people's paychecks just are not keeping up with the cost of rental units. You've already heard discussion about the lack of affordable public housing or subsidized housing. And we have a significant number of situations where late payments are actually causing people to be evicted, because those are also considered a part of the rent. So you keep getting late payments tacked on and tacked on and tacked on, and the next thing you know, you're going to be evicted basically because of all of the late payments you may owe. In addition to that, again, in those areas where the houses are below standard, you have situations where the air conditioners not half working, the heating units are not half working, air's coming in from everywhere, so the utility bills are going sky high. Now, if it's the dead of the winter, even though it's South Carolina, if you got to pay your light bill or your rent, and you have a little kid in the house or an old person in the house, okay, you got to choose. And you may pay your utility bill. Then some people think, well, I just won't pay my rent because the landlord won't fix this thing, whatever it is. In South Carolina, you can't withhold rent because the person hasn't repaired whatever needs to be repaired to keep your utility bills from going up. And people don't seem to understand that, so they end up being evicted. Then also in our state, evictions, we sometimes say, are just used as a means to collect rent. And the reason we say that that's the case is because the amount you have to pay for an eviction to be filed is so low. So, I mean, we really believe that that does happen. And of course, as you've already heard, the tenants don't understand their obligations when they get those rules to show cause. They don't understand about requesting the hearing. In some situations, they can request the hearing on one day and they could get the hearing the next day. Well, they don't have time to go find an attorney, even if they knew where to look for one. So that's just kind of basically an overview of what's happening, what we think is causing the rate of evictions to increase. So what did we do at Legal Services when that study came out? We decided that people don't understand their legal rights and responsibilities when they're served papers. So we put together an instructions for eviction hearings. And we asked the court to make some changes to our rule to show cause that provide more details to the tenant on the rights and what's supposed to happen and how they should conduct themselves when they're served. We put everything in the basket that we could think of on our little instruction sheet. Then we sent it over to court administration along with all of the articles we could find about evictions in our state. Court administration said, interesting. They got together a group of magistrates who looked at it and they thought, interesting. You know, because you've heard all of the negative ramifications of eviction actions. And magistrates are looking for ways not to put people out of their house. So these magistrates thought, this right might really help people because I can't tell them what to do in court. This may really help them. So these magistrates got together and they tweaked our request a bit and they sent it on up to our Supreme Court. And lo and behold, we are pleased to announce that with every rule to show cause is attached this document that tells people what they need to do if they are served with the rule to show cause. The rule to show cause was also amended to be clearer. One of the things that's listed on here that we are so pleased about is they tell them that they can call the South Carolina Bar Lawyer Referral and ask for a lawyer if they don't have one. But if you're the defendant and you cannot afford a lawyer, you may call South Carolina Legal Services, and it has our telephone number on it. Now, this just went into effect, so we don't know what's going. We don't know what's going to happen when everybody starts getting this and they start calling us. So, keeping that in mind, we got a T grant a couple of years ago, a year or so.
That's a technology
I'm sorry.
Yes.
A technology grant from the Legal Services Corporation to develop online classrooms. And one of the classrooms that we're developing is about tenants' rights and how to represent yourself in eviction actions. And we are really going, when we get finished with it, we are going to really market it to pro bono lawyers to start trying to help us when all of these calls start coming, as well as we will publicize it so that tenants themselves can become more educated about the eviction action and how all of that is supposed to work. Other things that we have been doing is in our local communities, we have been trying to participate in boards and with other partnering organizations that address housing issues. In Greenville, for example, there's a group who's collaborating with property managers, where they're trying to get these property managers basically to give people a second chance and then provide wraparound services, those kinds of services that will help secure the family, make the family more stable, to prevent a second eviction. So we're participating with groups like that. And so those are some of the things we're doing. As you can see, I'm very excited, and he's done like that and told me to shut up, so I shut up. One thing that everybody has been talking about, the consequences of evictions. South Carolina has one of the highest rates of domestic violence in the country. Domestic violence can also be caused by evictions based on the stress that's going on in the family. And children going into foster care is also a result of evictions. So there's the things that most people don't talk about that I'd like for you all to write down. Thank you.